Hi, I'm Juresh Yahya, co-founder of OSPROV, your organization's handy software. We provide flexible process automation to automate your critical manual process easily. Alright, so today I'm going to talk a bit about the topic on web programming. So we're going to learn, this is my first episode, so I'm going to teach about web programming using PHP Laravel. And then we will walk through from scratch, from starting until the end. So we're going to develop a use case, a software. So I'm going to use one scenario where I'm going to develop using PHP Laravel from scratch. Okay, so our topic for today is on web programming. So what is web programming? So okay, let me change the view first. Alright, so this is your typical web browser. Okay, you can see that from here you can type a URL. This is what we call the URL. So in this case, I'm typing osprov.com. This is our website for our application, our workflow workflow process automation system. So this is a typical web application which is developed using PHP Laravel. So our system is using PHP Laravel. So this is it. Okay, and then you have a lot of typical. Hi Amira. Thank you for sharing the stream. All right, so let's take one simple. Hello Hazira, thank you for liking the stream. So let's take one simple application. Okay, I have this one application called Wave Apps. This is a accounting software. So this is a typical application, and then you have okay, for example, you have WhatsApp. This one is also a typical web application. Okay, so what are the differences? So let me just show you a bit. Hello, Shu. Thank you for liking the stream. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let me switch the screen a bit. Alright, so yeah, let me just jot down here. Okay, in a typical whiteboard. Okay, so let's take one example. Okay, we have software. So this is what we call software. Okay, from software to develop a software, we need to do programming. So basically, programming is like a language where you tell this dumb machine, okay, a computer or server is what we call a dumb machine. It's a dumb machine. Okay. Computer will require what we call a language. So let me just put, okay. So they will require this set of instruction. So this is instruction that's going to teach this dumb computer what to do. So that's a typical language that we use to program our software. Okay, but what kind of software do we have? Okay, in the IT world, we have a typical software. The most basic one is what we call a desktop software. Okay, what are the kinds of desktop software that we have? Okay, one example, you have your Windows. Okay, OS, or what we call operating system, is a software. So it is developed using a certain set of programming language. So that's how we typically create operating system. So anything, even our OS, we going to have something called, we're going to develop it using a certain set of programming. So that's a typical kind of information that we have. Okay, we're going to have something, and then what else we have? Okay, let me check. Okay, so let's look back. That's a typical kind of information. All right. Okay, that's one thing. We have a desktop. Okay, what other software that we have? Okay, you have what we call, for example, let's say you have a server. So we have what we call client server kind of software. Server client. So this is a server software. So for example, let's take a typical okay, call center. You have a call center where we're going to call an operator in a typical contact center. So that is the entire system is run on what we call server software. Okay, and then we will have the rest what we have. Okay, and then now with the internet. Hello Muzamil, thank you for following. Okay, and then we have what we call the web software. Okay, when the internet was invented, and you have a typical web browser, so that's where a lot of system is being developed using web. So web is running on what we call the HTTP protocol. Okay, later on I will maybe explain a bit on this protocol. Protocol is actually a way how computer can talk with each other. So in this case, okay, a typical web software will have what we call client. Client is our web browser, and then we will have the server, the web server. The web server is residing on somewhere in the world. So they communicate using what this we call HTTP programming. Okay, I will drive on this later. Let me just explain a bit on what kind of other software that we have. Okay, and then we typically have, okay, now with smartphones that we now have what we call the mobile software. So you have Windows Server. Windows is a operating system, your desktop software, and then you have your server software, you have your web software, and then of course now you will have your mobile software. Okay, all right, so let's explain a bit more on our web software. So let me clear this up. Okay, I'm going to create a new one. Okay, so let's talk about web software. Okay, we have the web. So a typical browser or a typical web software, okay, it's going to have a client. Okay, and then we're going to have the server. So how, okay, the client is our web browser. So you have many browser. Okay, you have Chrome. Chrome I think is the most popular, and then you have the Internet Explorer, and then you might have Firefox. Sorry, not the animal fox. It's a Firefox. All right. Okay. And then what else we have? Chrome, IE, Firefox. Uh, okay, and then you have some other obscure like Opera, and then okay, Safari for those who using iOS. Okay, on the server side, usually the typical web server that we have, okay, most of the web server that is running in this world is you have Apache. Okay, and then you will have, okay, let me take example, okay, Nginx. Okay, And then what else you have? Okay, you have other like the Tomcat, Apache Tomcat, and the rest. So there's a lot of other web server lah. But the main one is these two lah, Apache and Nginx. So a typical request is that, for example, let's say you browse, take one example, news website maybe. Okay, we take CNN. Okay, you in your browser you type www.cnn.com example. See what happens is that in the browser it will send a request to the server. Okay, so this is using what we call the HTTP protocol. HTTP stands for hypertext protocol. Okay, and then the server will take this a typical request, and then it will respond. So this is what we call a request, and this is what we call a response. Okay, so you have request and then you have response. That's a typical web software application. Okay, and then what else do you have? Okay, you going to have, okay, let me think. An application will have, for example, you will go to the website, you will respond it, and then you have typical like login. So there's also, when they respond, they can have what we call session. Session is where they try to maintain, okay, your information. I mean, you are the one requesting. They try to mention the session. For example, if you already log in, so you have this thing called session. Okay, what about our language that we have, like PHP? Okay, for the web server, a typical one is you're going to have in the back end is what we call the app server. Okay, in our case, the one that I'm going to teach from scratch is we are going to use PHP. PHP is the language, and then of course our framework that we're going to use is Laravel. This one I'm going to teach you all about this later in our next episode lah. In this case, just let's concentrate on the main one. What is web programming? Okay, so this is the PHP Laravel. Okay, and then we're going to have, when we talk about programming, you might have access to what we call a database. So in this case, a typical database that people will use is going to use like MySQL. That one is one of the most popular one. You have Microsoft SQL. Okay, and then you have Oracle maybe. So there's a few database. So what happens is that in a typical request, like here, when they request for a page, okay, the server will check on the app server, and it will do some programming to see, okay, let's say you viewing a news page, so the PHP will render the page using whatever information already stored inside the database. So they have the news in the database. So that's a typical how web software works, or web programming works. So what is web programming? Okay, the simplest example. Okay, so let me switch my screen first. Hold on. Okay, let me close the whiteboard and open back the browser. Alright, so a typical web browser. Okay. Okay, what is the language that usually the standard one that we use? Okay, if you look at the view page source, okay, see this very cryptic kind of language. Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, you see all these different texts. So this is the first programming language, which is the HTML. So this is a HTML programming language. So you can see here, you can see that, okay, they have the text HTML. HTML is hypertext, so this is what we call text, and then you have like the instruction here, and then they have the properties here. So you can see a typical, okay, like here example, okay, this is the body. Usually in HTML you have the header. Header will contain the typical what we call metadata. So it will explain, for example, the title of your web browser here. And then you will have the body. So this is the body. Okay, and then from the body you can see that there's instruction here. For example, let's take one. This one what we call a simple tag. So A class knife brand. Okay, you have the image src as set. Okay, so this what it says that, okay, I'm using a link here to just display this logo. So this is the file, the logo file, and I'm displaying it here. So that's the programming, what it does, where it typically just explain on this OSPROV. Alright, OSPROV logo. Okay, that's one example. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, we have the one that we're going to learn later on. Is what we call the PHP. Okay, a typical PHP language. Hello Haizam, thank you for liking the stream. Welcome to the stream. Alright, so does web system must be a cloud system? Not necessarily. Be okay, when we talk about cloud, okay, let me just explain a bit on cloud. Okay, let me create a new whiteboard. Okay, so what what is cloud? Okay. Cloud is actually just terms that they use. Okay, we have like what we call public cloud. Okay, what it means is that, okay, you can have a application, web application. It can reside on your own hardware. So let's say you have a data center, your own data center, and it's running on your own hardware. Okay, so then this is not a cloud. Okay, so you can have a typical web application using your own data center, or maybe you can even store, if you have the web software and you have the app software, the PHP for example, you can install it on your desktop PC, and you can expose your public IP address, and you can have a domain name to link with your web application. You can also have a web application running running on the desktop below your table, so you can also have that. Okay, but what typically nowadays that people use is that they use the cloud, what we call public cloud. So typical public cloud that we have AWS. Okay, you also have Azure. This is Microsoft product, and then you can also have other smaller cloud player like Linode, DigitalOcean. So you have the rest lah. The public cloud is basically just like a data center but managed by these players. Instead of your own, you manage it yourself. So that's a public cloud. Okay, why the reason people use cloud? Because nowadays, okay, to deploy your software, your web programming, you have to deploy. You can do your local development, and then you have to deploy it. So when you deploy it to the public cloud, what happens is that usually it will you need to configure some settings, but because they make it so easy for you to deploy, it's like just pressing a button and your website, your application will be updated. So that's why people use uh, public cloud. Okay, does that answer your question? I hope it explains a bit on your question. Okay, you can ask in Malay if you want. I will answer your question in Malay too. Alright. Okay, so let's move on. Let me just close this one. Okay. Let's talk about the language that we're going to use, which is PHP. So let's see the syntax. Okay, let me take. Okay, example of a document. Okay, let me check. Okay, PHP. You have a lot of documents last time. Okay, let's view online. Okay, okay. Here we'll explain on installation. So my next episode, I'm going to explain on installing PHP and all that. But now let's just look at the typical PHP language that we have. Okay, so okay, PHP is also what we call is base. You can say base similar quite to HTML in that they have these tags, but then when you close the tags, when you close the tags, this is where the programming is executed. So that's the okay, example here. You have echo hello world. So you can have other syntax in the PHP. So that's a typical PHP language. Okay, what else do we have? Of course, later on I will explain a bit on the types, on the variable, and all that. So this let's just take example lah. Okay, so that's one example. Okay, let me just show a bit on. Okay, so this is a typical language. Okay, okay. Programming language you have usually they have a certain structure, a certain what we call the way how we do programming lah. So regardless of whatever language, you can have Java, you can have PHP, you can have Ruby on Rails, you can have C++, C Sharp, .NET, whatever. They have a certain structure. This one I will explain later on when we draft in the details of PHP. So let's not worry about that. So just take this one time at one thing at a time, and then let's grow together and increase our web programming skills together. So this is only the first episode. I will later draft it. I will explain all about this in detail in our next episode. All right. Okay. I think that's all for today. I think actually I'm planning just for 10 minutes, but now it's already nearly 20 minutes on this sharing. Um, okay. Thank you. Um, thank you for watching. See you on my next episode. All right.